Before we begin our Q&A, we actually wanted to recognize a great African leader, Nelson Mandela, who was a visionary within Africa as well as to the rest of the world. We are lucky to have with us the ambassador from South Africa, and we'd like to invite him to come say a few words if he'd like to come up.
Briefly, let me say, we really applaud this opportunity. We applaud the fact that the Peace Island and what I get your name? Journalist Writers Foundation have come up with this initiative, which is great. I must also thank the panelists. I think they did a good job, indeed, in summing our position. Let me also thank you for the sentiment about my former president, Nelson Mandela. But before I sit down, having said that, because I'm sure you want to engage in the substance that the colleagues have put before you, let me also just give me my little view. And to simply say, look, I don't know whether the calf is more fuller or is less half. But it's been a struggle in Africa to find a solution. It's a journey, and we've got to be able to gauge that journey and say, how far are we? How far have we gone? In all the areas that the colleagues have mentioned here: peace and security, social and development, and in the area of sustainable development. And I would want to say, part of doing that, to see how far we have gone and how far we are still going, would be to look at Africa's programs itself. We just adopted a program of Africa 2063. And this is an idea Africa is trying to say, this is how far we have gone. In 50 years' time, in celebration 50th anniversary of Africa, in 50 years' time, we want to be here. And so to read that program also comes also at a very important time, our intervention. We just adopted the AU, what we call the African Common Position on the post-2015 development goals. My analysis of the problem is that, look, Africa, first is the quest for unity. How far are we faring towards unity? And we have been very greatly disadvantaged. I compare with China. Here's China, big country. When it was colonized, they were fortunate to retain the whole country as it is. We were sort of subdivided into Nigeria, South Africa, and so on. Can you imagine? But Africa was, despite our differences in languages and so on, we remained being an African continent. Where would we have been today? I'm sure we would not be very far from China in terms of development. But these little sub-developments that we had created a huge problem. That one of the biggest obstacles has been the quest for unity. The OAU was formed precisely because of that, to try and unite Africa, to make it one formidable force, both politically and economically. We would have been a big force politically and economically. So the issue has been from the Lagos Program of Action to the creation of the AU. The AU is actually Africa saying, look, we have not been fast enough in integrating politically and economically. What do we need to do to fast-track all these programs, be they political or integrate economically? I remember the Lagos Program of Action was talking about a plan which is laid out, which would take so many times before, and they said, no, we need to move faster. In short, what I'm simply saying, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there are responsible leaders in Africa who are aware of these problems and trying to do the best that they can to fast-track and to find ways and means in which Africa can move much more faster. We will not be able to do anything if we don't have this political and economic. I think Ambassador Nduhura spoke about even the regional integration, how we move there. We will not be able to do that because as long as we're subdivided, it doesn't benefit us. It benefits external forces. Some people who don't want unity amongst ourselves or whatever are able to go and talk to this one and counterpose him against the other. So that is one problem. Yeah, I think there was one example mentioned about how we are doing with in the security area about standby forces. There was actually a decision now that whilst we're waiting for the formation of the standby force, which is taking long, some countries actually volunteered. We would want to be able to send in forces under the auspices and the authority of the AU where there is a problem. Because we find it embarrassing, much as we appreciate the support from outside, but we should be in a position ourselves at some stage to be able to send a force to Central African Republic rather than wait for France or for somebody to come all the way to come and resolve our own problem. When are we going to be in that position? So some countries are saying, whilst you people are trying to work out the modalities, we can't keep on saying we're waiting because some countries are burning. There are some problems. And we can't sit and wait and say we're waiting for some logistics here. Those that are able financially and many other ways in terms of resources are saying by this rapid force that has been created. In the meantime, you are trying to make up your mind. We would be ready to move. You should authorize us. As much as you can authorize France and many others, and we appreciate that, you should be able to authorize South Africa, Nigeria, and many other countries to move under the rule of law. You're not just going to move in there, because there is also, of course, the question of independence of states and so on and so on. I'm not supposed to be the panelist, but you did talk, for example, about the issue of responsibility to protect, which is being discussed today. And clearly that is an issue that Africa, as you know, has led in the Constitutive Act, where we have said we can't sit and wait when there is this genocides that are being committed. As Africans, we must be able to intervene where there is gross violation of human rights and so on. That extends to so many other areas. Many people tend to think we run away from the issue of good governance and the rule of law. And I'll say you're very far from the reality that is taking place in Africa. If you look at all the laws, the fight that we have been having to make sure that, for instance, the issue around unconstitutional forms of government, is Africa trying to find and make sure that indeed we don't continue to have this negative perspective about this continent which is trying. I would say, if you were to give us marks, yes, of course, we do have challenges. We sometimes move 2 steps forward and move 1 step backward. So we make progress. Economically, we do say there are some countries in Africa, a number of them, which have a certain level of growth consistently. Countries like Nigeria have had, for example, almost 10, 11 years of consistently growing at 6%, and many others. We still have other challenges as well. I think one of the panelists spoke here about the illicit flow of capital. So much as we are trying, the challenges we're facing are such that they are huge to surmount, but not insurmountable. This issue, for example, of the illicit flow of capital means that whilst we are hankering here about the aid and so on, actually 3 times more of what we are trying to get as aid is going out, just leaving the continent like that. And so you're fighting for this aid. But 3 times of our own money is going out. Estimation are that just in 1 year, Africa loses about 50 billion. Can you imagine what would happen if we were to take that 50 billion and make us service the issue of development around Africa? We would have been far. And so maybe even more than the 8, when we talk about the means of implementation post-2015 development, we should be saying, while 8 is important, while we must find our own means of alternative funding of our own programs and development, we must also find a way of stopping this illicit flow of capital. Thank you very much for your attention.